I've had people on this podcast that come on and discuss why we should take colonialism out of conservation. And a lot of people have been pushing for this for a long time. And we've wondered what is going to happen if that happens and when that happens. And today we're going to talk about an example, a potential example of what happens when you put conservation back into the hands of local people. We're going to be talking about Hawaiian communities that are restoring indigenous conservations from mountain to sea in Hawaii. And we're going to talk about the success that they've seen by doing this. That's what we're going to talk about on this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I am your host, Andrew Lewin, and on today's podcast, we're going to be talking about Hawaii and how Indigenous people are implementing or re-implementing an ancient or a traditional conservation approach and management approach of the land and sea back into their territories and the success that they are having. So we're going to talk about that and what those implications are, not only for the rest of Hawaii, but also internationally and for other Indigenous groups, including here in Canada and North America. Before we get into that, I just wanted to say, as people listen to this podcast, and a lot of people do, and when I listen to ocean podcasts, I get inspired, and I people start to say, hey, what if I did this as a career? What if I wanted to be a marine biologist, or what if I wanted to continue to be a marine biologist, or as I'm graduating from school, what do I want to be? And they want to work in a career of marine science and conservation. But it's not easy to do. Getting a job, first of all, is difficult. But getting a job without having a focus and a path that you wanted to do for your career is even more difficult. So I am offering you some advice and some job advertisements and how I would apply for job advertisements through a program. It's an audio program called Build Your Career in Marine Science and Conservation. It's $5 a month. Or $45 for the entire year. It is something that I feel that people require to not only get a job in marine conservation, but also build a career. So if you want to check that out, you can go to speakupforblue.com/career to get started today. It's $5 a month. You get weekly podcasts on not only just how to apply for jobs, but I give you examples of how I would apply for jobs with real examples of job ads, as well as some ongoing, sort of thoughts on where the careers are going and what you should be looking out for when you look out for careers. So check that out, speakupforblue.com/career. Let's get back into the show. Taking colonialism away from conservation. Last episode, I talked about how we should blow up the system, how we should sort of revamp the system of conservation and put it back into the hands of the people who want it the most. And one of those ways is to put back the power and re-empower communities, local communities, indigenous communities to use sort of traditional uses, merged with new sort of science and technology and capabilities to better manage a system. And in this case, we're going to be talking about an article that was published in Mongabay News by Roxanne Horn on May 2nd, 2023. I'm going to put the link in the show notes if you want to take a look at this article. It's a great article. Obviously, Mongabay does some fantastic work. But what I wanted to do is talk about this article because I think it's really important. And it's really important because it uses traditional ecological knowledge. It uses the traditions of management, of how people in Hawaiian communities would manage a local area. And the way they do it from mountains to sea. So it's a really cool thing what they do. They essentially, 3 communities participated in this. And according to the article, they successfully restored the process called, and I'm going to try and pronounce this properly, and if I don't, I highly apologize, Ahupua'a, my apologies, Ahupua'a practices and co-manage resources with government and private landowners. They've established indigenous and community conservation conserved areas, ICCAs, within their territories, leveraging rights and resources previously taken from them. The community's efforts have led to positive outcomes such as increased fish populations and recognition for an innovative conservation initiatives. The success of the communities serves as an example of embracing Indigenous culture and conservation practices for the benefit of both humans and nature. Now, you're probably wondering, like, this sounds great. I mean, this is, kind of a cool thing what the people are doing, but hasn't this been done all the time? And no, that's not necessarily the case. And there's some complications in that have to do with the way governments are set up. That has to do the way the sort of the land is sort of chopped up in a way, like from a boundary perspective, and then given to different departments, and how well those departments communicate within a government, and how those areas are managed within a government. And so it makes it difficult to look at it from a holistic approach. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about what these communities have done. The system, the Ahupua'a system, divides the islands along wedges running from the mountains to the oceans, and allows for the holistic management of resources. Now, if you go to the article when you have the chance, you'll see how they divide it up, and they have it from sections all the way from, like, it's almost like in a triangle or a pyramid format. And so you'll have some areas where the top is called the sacred forest zone. That's from where the high mountain areas. Then there's the wet forest zone as you move closer to the ocean, remote forest zone, timber forest zone, agroecology and habitat zone as you get close. And then it kind of goes, and there's wedges within that. And then it goes the inner reef zone when you hit the water, and then the outer reef zone as you go more closer or away from shore. And they said the vertical divisions for the system-based management within social ecological communities. So those zones that I talked about are sort of the management system that it has. And so there's a really cool pic. It's a schematic diagram of the regions, which is called Moku, and the communities, which is called Ahupua'a, documented from the island of Kauai. And I'll talk about that in a sec. And then the modeling used to depict how they look on the ground. So it's almost like a map with sort of 3D depictions of the mountain areas, and then where those zones fit into each of those areas. So it's not necessarily just the distance. If those zones exist and where those mountain ranges are, what the sea level rise or sea level height is, or height above sea level when you're talking about the mountains. And so they manage it that way, and they have all these different regions set up. Now, there are 3 communities that participated in this that started in and around the 2015-2016 time frame. The communities are called Haeya, and Kaupulehu. Now, I can't speak the language of this, so I'm trying to pronounce as best as possible. But if you do go to the article, you can get the spellings of the names and probably pronounce it a lot better with a lot more knowledge than I would. And so it's the communities were sort of on different areas and different islands. One of them was on Kauai, one of them was on Oahu, and I'll see if I can find that right now. I don't know if I can find it from the article. Let me just see if I can. No, I can't find it. Regardless, they were on various islands. So the island of Hawaii, the island of Oahu, and the island of Kauai. And so for instance, the Haeya community, the community worked in Haeya. The community worked to instate a collaboratively managed meta-ICA known as the Haeya National Estuarine Research Reserve. The reserve melds the management of 4 individual ICCAs in the mountains, coast, and ocean to create the traditional Ahupua'a's mountain-to-scale zoning. This is done in partnership with NOAA, the Hawaii Department of Land and Natural Resources, and the Hawaii Community Development Authority. And Kim Sanders, the advisor of the Coastal Marine and Island Environments at the ICCA Consortium, who's not involved in the paper that this article is talking about, is that idea of creating lots of small ICCAs in different ways and then finding a way to bring all of those together to create a meta ICCA, like one huge ICCA, I think is a really brilliant approach, she says. Another around the world and in Hawaii, each ICCA has been born of a unique pathway to navigate different bureaucratic obstacles. There's no cookie cutter approach to how you do these things. Now, what she's talking about there, Kim Sanders, is the fact that when you, and I kind of alluded to, when you look at a landscape in anywhere in, like, say, Canada or the US, because I know those systems better, and from a political and departmental standpoint, there are different departments that manage different aspects of the landscape. So within, like, and they all work at different scales. So for instance, you'll have municipal governments that handle specific areas within their municipality, right? And they may have, like here in Ontario, that we have conservation authorities that are manage local areas and local regions, and they divide up the regions, by wetland and by river system and so forth. And so you are able to, manage that from a municipal standpoint. And they're managed by the province, but they work locally. There's like 32 of them in the province. And then when you have like the provincial government, you have certain areas, like here in Ontario, you'll have certain departments that are regulating the lands and looking after the land aspect. Then you have certain ones that are looking after water, and then so anything in the Great Lakes, let's say, or the river systems. But then you also have like the land, the ones that are managing the land also manage the bottom of the Great Lakes or bottom of lakes. So the seabed or the lake bed, if you will. And so the same thing happens in the ocean as well. And in fact, there have been times where one department sues another, or a provincial government sues a federal government, like in Canada, because one has the oversight of the seabed and the other has oversight of the water column. And it's like, who decides if there should be a protected area and where does that land, and what if it's being leased out and things like that. So it can get very complicated when you look at how political divides from scale. So municipal, regional, provincial, and federal governments are managing different parts of the land. And then, of course, what they're managing, what their role is within that land. That can be very complicated. So now imagine you taking those layers, okay? And even within a federal government or within the provincial government, there are different departments that have access to different layers. So there's, and if you look at government as well, there's a lot of sort of silos within government. And what I mean by that is that different departments stick to each other in their own work. It's very rare where they cross. Well, I shouldn't say rare. Traditionally, it's been rare, but it's not surprising to ask one person of a department what the other person of the department is doing, and they have no idea. It's just the way it goes, unfortunately. And, there are systems that are working to take down those silos and take down those barriers, but it's not difficult. I mean, it's not easy. And so it could be something that can provide a lot of headaches and a lot of problems within departments. Now imagine trying to conserve land when you have so many hands in the pot. We have so many hands that have to have a say, and what's the legality of that say, and what can they do? And now on top of that, you have the people who live there, the local people, and their governments. A lot of indigenous governments, right, want to say, they deserve a say, and a lot of the times they know how to manage the lands and the water better than the government because they live there. Not only do they live there, but for generations, they've occupied those areas, right? And they know how things have changed. They know changes on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a quarterly basis, a monthly basis, right? They know those changes. And governments don't. And oftentimes what happens is governments will come into a local area and be like, this is what we've decided that our framework, our conservation framework, is going to be for the entire nation, right? If they come in from a federal perspective, and we're going to apply this to your local area. So you have, this is what you have to work with. And they do it with good intentions. There's no doubt about that, but it may not be the correct way of doing things. Instead of looking at it from a perspective of, hey, let's ask these indigenous people what they think is how they think this land and water should be managed. A lot of times it comes from a government perspective, like this is how this land and water should be managed, and it's going to be done throughout the country to make it consistent. Well, I hate to say it, but in many places in That's not even a hate. It's actually a beautiful thing to say. Many places, not only within Canada or the US or any islands, they're very unique. And they're unique for a reason. They have unique characteristics. They're not all made up the same. They may share similar habitats and similar ecosystems or climate patterns, but they are all different because there are different people that live there. The way the water hits, the way it reacts with the sediment and so forth, it's all very different. So to see a story like this repeated 3 times for 3 different communities, which I'm sure is a small part of the islands of Hawaii, this is nice to see. This is seems like it's a turn of events, and the fact is that not only was it a turn of events just to re-empower, give back the power that the Indigenous people originally had, we're actually seeing great results, right? The Kaupua'a Marine Reserve, the ICCA, after its creation in 2016, established a 10-year ban on the harvesting of any aquatic life to let resources, quote-unquote, rest and replenish. And it showed positive results not long after. 4 years after its designation, the Nature Conservancy's report showed a 310% increase in the biomass of surgeonfish, which is like, surgeonfish is like the dory type fish and the tangs and so forth, in the reserve, as well as a rise on other fish important to the local community. In 2022, the state identified Kahupua'a as a critical area for coral reef restoration. So what happens is not only did it get better biomass and numbers from its fish after that rest, after a 10-year rest, this is after a 4-year report, or a report that looked at the first 4 years, it also gained more important, like a rise in sort of the fish community itself, which increases diversity, which increases stability of the local areas. And in 2022, the area was designated as a critical area for coral reef restoration because now they realize that this way, and because of a 10-year ban, we can actually take advantage of, sort of an increasing community of fish and probably invertebrates, and again, eventually, a community of coral reefs, barring any kind of climate change aspects, right? But having that positive outcome really helps. And if we look in 2015, the community of Haina established the first fully functional community-based subsistence fishing area in the world as an ICCA. In 2021 5-year study of Hawaii's aquatic resources and coral showed improvements since 2015. The report indicated that the richness and abundance of native fishes important to the hyena community for food, like ninu or chub of several different Kyphosis species, and kala or blue-spined unicorn fish have increased inside the protected area. Now, when you have these protected areas, you'll eventually have spillover. So as there are more species, as there are more fish, and there are more the biomass is bigger, they're going to eventually compete for resources, and they're going to move outside the boundaries of the marine protected area. So we get that quote unquote spillover effect, so that people can fish and they can do other things, and they can hopefully restore adjacent areas within that community. But they'll always have that protected area as long as it's managed properly, and it continues to be managed properly. Then you get buy-in from the local communities, because like, hey, not only do we have more food, not only do we have better ways and better environment to live with, but we did it ourselves. We did it ourselves because we got the power back to do that. And I think that's an important aspect of the story. That's the important aspect of the story. Now, how do we apply this internationally or into other areas? Do we hold? I would assume we'd have to hold workshops on these areas, and to get the sort of the stories and the accounting and the monitoring of how the people of these 3 communities did it, because and was successful in doing it. What led to those successes? What was unique about each and every community, and how can they apply it to other communities, not only in Hawaii but internationally? And I think that's something that will definitely be taken into account. This story was actually published, I believe, in a pretty popular journal, The Ecology and Society, which outlines the pathways of 3 Hawaiian communities. So they were, Hyena was on the island of Kauai, Haea was on the island of Oahu, and Kapulahu was on the island of Hawaii. So I think it's something to definitely look into. Take a look at this article. I think it's such a great opportunity to see what happens when we, empower local communities or really give back the power of local communities to manage their own resources. I think this is a really interesting story. It has implications for future conservation sort of policy and future conservation pathways and processes. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this story. If you would DM me at How to Protect the Ocean, you can let me know how you feel about this article. Did I get it right? If I'm mispronouncing it, please tell me how to pronounce some of these names. But I also want to know how you feel about the article. Do you think this should be applied elsewhere? We have Oceans Week coming up at Chow, which is the Capitol Hill Oceans Week, coming up in June. And I think this is something that should be discussed. I hope it's discussed because there are partnerships with government here. The government has to support this. And I think NOAA was supporting a bunch of these projects. So I think it's going to be really cool to see what comes out of it and how it gets expanded, if it gets expanded. So let me know how you feel at How to Protect the Ocean on Instagram. DM me. And also, if you want to sign up, and this is inspiring you to build your own career in marine conservation and science, you can go to speakupforblue.com/career and sign up today to get your job and get started on getting your job and building your career in marine science and conservation. So thank you so much for listening to this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.